All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope all of you guys had an incredible week and that you had a good holiday. It feels good to be back. I sincerely appreciate all of you guys who offered condolences after the passing of my grandmother in the YouTube comments. It means a lot to me. I'm glad we were able to get out there. Specifically, Thanksgiving is the holiday I think about the most when I think about my grandmother, because my family lives out here in Tucson, my mom and dad, but both of their families are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so when we were kids, we went to Texas every single year for Thanksgiving, sometimes driving 16 hours if the flights were too full, right? And we had Thanksgiving at my grandma's house, and she was this amazing cook from the Midwest. And I still have these like vivid memories of me like playing with my cousins in the yard or in the living room as my grandmother was directing traffic in the kitchen. I just hear her voice in the background, and she was this truly incredible woman and a rock for my dad's family. And so obviously it was sad for her, for us all to not have her there. But at the same time, I think we did what she would have wanted us to do. And we kind of just had a throwback Timpf gathering for Thanksgiving out in Texas. And so I think that was important for everybody in my family to be out there. I'm really thankful that I was able to get out there. And then we came home and we celebrated Thanksgiving with my wife's family as well. Got to have a little bit of a break. Obviously, we haven't worked since last Friday. As you guys know, it's not just me. It's everyone behind the scenes as well that makes this show tick. And we've just been going crazy. Like, we've done almost 7 shows a week since I got back from Japan in July. That's just the pace that we've been going. And so obviously it was important for us to take a little bit of a break, and I'm glad we were able to do so. But I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to talk some basketball. Today we're going to be hitting briefly on all 6 of our contenders. It's going to be like a contender check-in show today. So we had 6 teams in our contender list to start the season. If you remember, it was number 1, the Nuggets, 2 Bucks, 3 Celtics, 4 Lakers, 5 Suns, 6 Warriors. Briefly touch on all of them. Then there are 5 teams that I consider to be surprises here early in the season with how successful they've been. We're going to do brief touches on all of them as well. And then there's one of those teams that we're going to be bumping into the contender tier to increase the size of that tier up to 7 teams. So we're going to be hitting on 11 teams today. Then we're going to take Saturday, Sunday off. And then we'll be back Monday to get back into our power rankings and back into our usual routine as we move forward from there. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel. It would mean a lot to me if you guys would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts, under Hoops Tonight. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT for video analysis as well as show announcements. And then last but not least, don't forget to keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments so we can keep hitting them at the end of our shows. All right, let's talk some basketball. All right, before we get to our contenders, I want to take a quick look at these 5 surprises. There are 5 teams this year that I think have exceeded expectations in a big way. The Minnesota Timberwolves at 11-3, the Oklahoma City Thunder at 11-4, the Magic at 10-5, the Mavericks at 10-5, and then the Sixers. After the Harden trade, having them at 10-5, I would say is a little bit of a surprise this early in the season as well. Now, 4 of those 5 teams are teams that I talked about before the season. I talked about the Timberwolves as being a team I expected to be better this year. Same for OKC, same for Orlando, same for Dallas. That said, even within that context, I think all 4 of those teams are ahead of where I even expected them to be at this point. So I want to take brief touches on all 5 of those teams. And then one of those teams I'm going to be moving into our contender tier. And that team is the first team on that list, the Minnesota Timberwolves. So they still have the best defense in the league by defensive rating, allowing just 106.2 points per 100 possessions. Anthony Edwards has cooled off a little bit in terms of efficiency from where he was to start the year, but that was kind of to be expected because he was hitting his pull-up jump shot in particular at just a preposterous rate to start the year. And so the cool-off was inevitable, but it hasn't really mattered. They've kept winning. Karl Towns has been a huge bright spot. Karl Towns was one of the guys before the season that I talked about as kind of the odd man out, because if you look at this group as a identity, it's this combination of perimeter defense and rim protection, right? It's what Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels and Kyle Anderson and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and all these guys are capable of on the perimeter, anchored by Rudy Gobert at the rim. And when you put Cat in there at the 4, it kind of fundamentally changes the overall foot speed of the lineup and what they're capable of in rotation and a bunch of different things, right? But it's worked really well for 2 reasons, in my opinion. First of all, he's been much needed for them on the offensive end of the floor as a shot creator, especially in static situations when the defense is loaded up on him. In fact, he's run 95 post-ups and ISOs this year, and including passes, that's amounted to 102 points, which is very good. Anytime you're getting over a point per possession in static half-court shot creation, that's a legitimate boost to any offense when you're trying to break a defense down, right? But most importantly, his defensive effort, not just in like help side situations, but also on the glass as well, has been better than where it was in recent years. He's been good as a low man, offering help at the rim and cleaning up the defensive glass. His deflections are up, his steals are up, his blocks are up, his defensive rebounds are up. Like, he just, all in all, has been more active on that side of the floor. And so when you combine him being kind of like a good offensive number two next to Anthony Edwards, with him just being better defensively and on the glass than we're accustomed to seeing, it's actually made him a very useful part of this team. He's hitting 57% in effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot jump shots. He's consistently drawing double teams on post-ups. In the post is where he's been most effective. He's been a little less effective in ISO, but he's been pretty good there as well. And that kind of thing is just, it's still early. I'm really curious to see where we're at with the Cat dynamic when we get closer to the trade deadline, because I think like all signs still point to him as being like the one guy that kind of doesn't necessarily make sense within the identity of the team. But if he keeps defending like this and he keeps being a productive offensive player, it just makes sense to keep him there as that number 4 next to Rudy Gobert, right? Jaden McDaniels has been out with this grade 1 ankle sprain. We're expecting to see him back within a week or two. Naz Reid is still giving them consistent double-figure production off the bench, and they're starting to force more turnovers. If you guys remember at the beginning of the season, that was my one critique in their defense, is that with as good as they are on the ball, they should be more disruptive than they are, but in recent weeks, they've been better. Now they're all the way up to 10th in opponent turnovers per 100 possessions. Now, I am moving the Timberwolves into that top tier of contenders. Here's why. Number one, this defense is real. It's not fool's gold. This is a real top-tier championship-level defense. They are nearly perfect in terms of defensive personnel. They don't just have point-of-attack defenders, but they have multiple different kinds of point-of-attack defenders. You could literally take Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, and Kyle Anderson, and they all kind of slot into a different type of position group, right? Like, Anthony Edwards is a guard defender, but he also is so damn strong and has such a low center of gravity and is such a top-tier athlete, he can guard bigger wings. We've seen him have success on bigger star wings this year, right? Nickeil Alexander-Walker is more of a traditional guard defender, a little slider, but he's good navigating screens and has tons of length. Then you have Jaden McDaniels, who's your stereotypical perimeter wing, and then you have Kyle Anderson, who's your stereotypical bigger wing, right? And so they kind of have a body for everybody, And then even when we look in the front court, as you look into like athletic front court players, Rudy Gobert is, arguably one of the very best options you could have in a situation like that. When you get into the bigger bodies and stuff, like we saw in the Nuggets game, they've even been able to use Karl Anthony Towns essentially as that big, that fire hydrant version of the post defender that can kind of prevent bully ball plays from happening. And when you slot Rudy Gobert behind him as a help defender, that can be impactful. So in terms of defensive personnel and versatility, I don't think there's a team right now that marches out the type of personnel that they put out there. And so the defense is real. That's not going anywhere. And I think that's a big indicator of the fact that this team has championship potential, because they flat out have a championship defense. And that is not going anywhere on any given night. And if you want to beat this team 4 times out of 7, you're going to have to contend with what they're capable of on the defensive end of the floor. They are also thriving in a very difficult schedule. The opponent winning percentage for Minnesota is 55%. That's the 3rd highest in the league. And they are 7-2 versus teams that are 500 or better, which is the best record in the league against teams that are 500 or better. So again, like just in terms of what they've accomplished within the scope of this regular season so far, they are passing every test along the way. And then lastly, the biggest thing that stands out to me on film, and this has been for years, but it's even more so this year, and when you couple that with what this defense is capable of, it gets me excited, and that is the simple fact that nobody can stop Anthony Edwards from getting to his spots. His ability to, as an athlete, get to spots makes it so that defenders have to give him space, which is effectively conceding to him high-quality pull-up jump shots that he's been hitting at a high rate in the playoffs. Right? And so what I imagine is this incredible defense that can throw you into your worst tendencies, while on the other end of the floor, Anthony Edwards is going to get great looks. And it's just a question of whether he can make enough pull-up jump shots or if he can make enough reads when the defense loads up on him. And there still is occasional possessions. There's a play There was a play the other day in the Sixers game when they played the Sixers without Embiid, where he drove down into the lane and tried to attack 3 Sixers in the paint when Shake Milton was completely unguarded on the right wing, and he missed that kick out. And I'm like, okay, these are little things you can do that will make the game easier for you. Just make that pass, because you're just going to get the ball next possession, and then that dude won't help as much, and then you'll have more opportunity to work, right? And like, even then, though, he's doing better with that stuff than he did in years past. And so, like, I just see all signs pointing to the fact that this team is every bit as good, even within the playoff context, as the teams that are in that championship tier. And so I think they belong there for the time being. The second team on our surprises list at 11-4 is the Oklahoma City Thunder. You're seeing a lot of the outstanding, offensive potential of this team with all their ball handling, shooting, and passing and their 5-out attack, right? Like, you're seeing the potential of the potential of the defense anchored by excellent perimeter defenders. When you've got Lou Dort out there, Jalen Williams, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with all that length and athleticism and size on the perimeter, they can cause a lot of problems for teams at the point of attack, right? And then we've even seen that with Cason Wallace as an additional perimeter defender off the bench. And so lots of exciting stuff there. They're protecting the paint well. Chet Holmgren has helped them anchor down a good paint defense, which they did not have last year. They are 8th in opponents' points in the paint per 100 possessions. But the reason why I don't have super high expectations for this team in the big picture is they're still too small on that front line. They're 29th in defensive rebounding. And again, I still think that ideally you need to have a really big forward slotted next to Chet Holmgren to physically hold up against some of the bigger, stronger teams that you have to contend with at the top of both conferences. Now, question is, why are they still winning despite being 29th in rebounding? Easy schedule. The Thunder have an opponent winning percentage of 47.9%. That is one of the somewhere in the bottom 10. I can't remember exactly where. And they've played 8 games against below 500 teams, and they're 7-1 in those games. So that's given them enough in the standings, so to speak. But we've seen consistently when they've run into better teams, specifically teams with bigger front lines, that they've struggled to contend physically. In the NBA, the game can change in an instant, but no matter how the action unfolds, DraftKings Sportsbook has your back. This week, new customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets just for betting $5 on basketball. Win or lose, you get an instant dub. They even have great same-game parlays. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on basketball, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code HOOPS. The crown is yours. Next is the Dallas Mavericks at 10-5. Same type of thing as the Thunder, right? Like, you're seeing the incredible, just how difficult it is to guard this team when they spread you out and all their top tier ball handling, and they're shooting better than you've expected. They're defending a little better than I expected them to this year, but they're still too small. And that to me is going to continue to cause problems as they play better teams. They played 7 teams that are 500 or better at this point. They're just 3-4 in those matchups. And they were down 2 against the Lakers until that Kyrie Irving jump shot. Otherwise, they'd be 2-5 against teams that are 500 or better. So a lot to be excited about with Dallas. They're better than where I expected them to be in the standings at this point, but more or less they're demonstrating what I expected to this point, which is they are a lot better than they were last year, and they're certainly going to have a puncher's chance to beat anybody in any one series. It's just in order to win 4 of them, to beat great teams 4 times in a row, 4 out of 7 times, I'm a little worried about that overall personnel shortcoming in the front court in terms of size and athleticism. The Orlando Magic at 10-5, coming off a huge win over Denver, albeit without Jamal Murray. They're 3rd in defense, 5th in offensive rebounding. They're huge, and they're athletic, and they're a royal pain in the ass to deal with in the regular season because of what they do to you at the point of attack, because of their overall size on the front line, because of how relentless they are attacking the offensive glass, because of how relentless they are in transition. They're just a difficult team to deal with. Young and big and athletic, right? They just really struggle to score in the half court. Only the Detroit Pistons, Toronto Raptors, Chicago Bulls, Memphis Grizzlies, and Portland Trailblazers have scored worse in the half court according to Cleaning the Glass. So that's the big thing holding me back from taking them like really seriously as a contender, right? But obviously having a ton of success this season. They were a team that I expected to go up a level this year and to make the playoffs, and it looks like they're on track to do so. Paolo, in his last 11 games, 22 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists, with 2 stocks on 50% from the field and 51% from 3. So really encouraging play from him as well. The 3-point shooting in particular is exciting because that was one of the big knocks on him coming into the draft, right? And then lastly, the Philadelphia 76ers, again, 10-5, and the Sixers were traditionally a good team. That said, without James Harden, I think it's a little bit of a surprise. Now, some of it is their schedule has been a little light, and as they've gone into a tougher schedule, they've looked a little bit more limited, right? Like they've lost 4 of their last 6. They beat the Hawks and Nets in that span, and they lost to Indy, Boston, Cleveland, and Minnesota, 4 really good teams, right? So again, to me, it's firepower issue. Defensively, they've regressed a little bit over the course of the last couple of weeks. Not as good at the point of attack, not as good in rotation in particular. But overall, this is going to be something you see consistently throughout this season is they're going to be one of those teams who's well coached and has good players, but they just lack that little bit of extra offensive firepower to be able to beat the best of the best. And that's going to be something I think we continue to see throughout the season. That said, I think a trade, the right trade, could go a long way towards propelling them into the contender tier at some point during the season. All right, moving on to our list of contenders. So again, this is going to be very, very different than my power rankings. Power rankings are very much just within the scope of the regular season. This is my list of contenders ranked in order of how likely I think they are to win, just to win the championship. So this is strictly within the postseason context. And again, as you guys know, I am not Mr. Overreact to regular season basketball. Never really have been. So not a lot of changes. As a matter of fact, we've added 1 new team, but everyone else is in the same order except I flipped 2 teams. And so again, that's just a good indicator to you guys of the fact that like even just through 15 regular season games, I'm not ready to redefine completely the way that I view some of these teams. That said, as we go through the list, I am going to give brief touches on all of them and just talk about how they've been playing as of late. All right, so number 7 on this list, the Golden State Warriors. It's 7-9. So the obvious question is, Jayson, the Warriors are below 500. They've lost 7 of their last 8 games. How in the world would you consider them to be a contender? And the answer is really simple. Things have gone horribly, horribly wrong. And they're 7-9. So no, I'm not going to freak out. Now, I've seen a lot of freak out from Warriors fans. A lot of people calling for Kerr to be fired, which is ridiculous. He's the second best coach in the NBA. A lot of people saying that massive trades need to be made and Klay Thompson should be traded and Andrew Wiggins should be traded. Basically, everybody that's not Steph Curry should be traded, right? I've just seen all sorts of negativity. Now, here are 4 reasons why every single Warriors fan needs to just take a deep breath and relax. Number 1, Steph hurt his knee and missed 2 games, and they were both losses. So they're actually 7-7 when their best player plays. Number 2, Draymond Green has barely played. The Warriors have played 773 minutes this year. Draymond has only played 200. And he's your defensive anchor. He's probably your second or third best player, depending on who you ask. With how poorly Wiggins has been playing, he's probably your second best player, right? So your second or third best player overall has missed basically 3/4 of the season. That's a huge punch to the gut, right? Third, Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins will both play much, much better over the course of this season. Through 13 games, so going into the Oklahoma City game, through 13 games, neither one of them had logged a single 20-point game. I saw that stat the other day and I was completely mind blown. But in their last 3 games, they've done it 3 times. So Klay Thompson is off back-to-back 20-point games. They're clearly trending in the right direction. And then lastly, the schedule will get a lot easier. The Warriors' opponents so far this season have won 57% of their games, which is by far the highest mark in the league. They've played by far the hardest schedule. They've played 1 below 500 team all season. It was the Detroit Pistons and they beat them. So again, Steph missed 2 games, so that's 2 losses. Draymond Green's missed 3/4 of the season. Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins have played like crap. And you've played an impossible schedule. And you're still 7-9. So everybody just relax and take a deep breath. What have I always said about good and bad stretches in the NBA? Good stretches typically are a confluence of getting your guys healthy and playing a lighter schedule. Whenever you win 8, 9, 10 games in a row, That's what happens. Nobody just goes on the road and beats the Celtics and beats the Bucks and then beats the Sixers and then no one just rips off winning streaks against all the best teams in the league. No one does. It doesn't happen. Win streaks are almost always lighter schedule, good health luck. Bad stretches, like when you lose 7 out of 8, they're usually bad health luck, tough schedule. And Steph missed time and Draymond's been missing time. And you've played really tough games and some other guys aren't playing well, they've lost some games. As a matter of fact, ESPN's RPI, which is basically just like a standings ranked based on strength of schedule, has them at 9th right now. So yeah, I'm not going to be making any giant sweeping declarations or significant calls about the Warriors and what they're capable of in the big picture after this 15 games or 16 games. Like maybe in the long run, maybe we can have another conversation at the deadline, but this is the wrong time. Now is the absolute worst time to make serious decisions about the Warriors' future. Because Draymond will come back from his suspension, and Klay Thompson will play better, and Andrew Wiggins will play better, and they will face a normal schedule. I think they have the second easiest remaining schedule in the NBA. So, I would imagine they're going to rip off some wins soon. And then maybe we'll see how things go. Now, again, what did I say before the season? My biggest concern with the Warriors was offensive firepower outside of Steph. Have we seen anything this year that makes us think that they fixed that problem? No. So that's why I have them down at 7. And that's why I'm not more optimistic about the team than I was to start the year. We need to see key offensive players start to play better. But there's just no reason to remove them from this tier over really bad evidence. Just evident, you know what I've learned about the Nuggets over the course of the last few weeks? That they can't win the title without Jamal Murray. That's not a sweeping declaration. That's not some sort of huge surprise. I've learned about the Warriors that they can be pretty bad when they play a bunch of good teams in a row without their second or third best player and with a bunch of their key guys not playing well. It doesn't reveal anything. And so that's why I still have them in my contender tier for right now. Number 6, Minnesota Timberwolves, we already discussed. Main reason why I have them this low is their half-court offense, 18th in half-court offense. A championship run from this team would basically require Anthony Edwards to have an all-time great playoff run, which is certainly on the table, but there are more likely things to happen higher up on the list, which is why I have them down at number 6. But in the contender tier where I didn't have them to start the year. Number 5, the Phoenix Suns. The start has not been super encouraging in my opinion. 9-6. They are 7th in offense, but they've played the second easiest schedule in the NBA so far. Suns opponents have just a 44% winning percentage. Just 1 win in 5 tries against teams that are 500 or better, and their defense is tailing off. They're 27th in their last 5 games, and they've dropped to 20th for the season. And then also for the season, they're 26th in defensive rebounding. So a lot of concerns on that front, right? But once again, not a lot of this is relevant to the potential playoff ceiling of this team. Their big 3 is yet to play a single minute together. Bradley Beal had an aggravation of his back injury. It appears to be potentially even getting worse. But they shut him down for 3 weeks. My guess is they're going to take his sweet time getting back, which is smart. Devin Booker and KD have shared the floor for just 5 of their 15 games and just 108 minutes out of the 735 minutes the Suns have played. And in those minutes, they're killing people. They're outscoring teams by 21.4 points per 100 possessions. The defense is okay, and the offense is off the charts good. Those two are scoring together 134 points per 100 possessions as a team. That's so I'm not, again, with this particular team, once again, we have to think within the big picture of what this team is going to look like in May. And in May, they very well could possibly have Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant on the floor together, which has demonstrated to be a different beast than some of the stuff that we've seen in recent weeks, right? So don't want to overreact to that. Eric Gordon has been really good for them. In all likelihood, I think he's going to be your 5th guy alongside the big 3 and Nurkic. That's been kind of the question early in the season. Who's going to be that 5th guy? Eric Gordon's giving them reliable spot-up shooting, reliable production, and he's a better defensive option and more versatile defensive option with his ability to switch on to bigger players than some of the other guys they have in that lineup. So right now, I think in the big picture, there's still a lot of potential there, but I haven't seen anything that would push me to believe that they should be higher on this list based simply on the fact that they're not rebounding and they're not defending as well as they need to win at this point in the season. Now, again, we saw at the start of the season, they did defend it at a much higher level. That to me is an indicator of what this team is capable of, right? Also, that Minnesota game in particular. They did an excellent job defensively in that game. They took an elite defense in Minnesota and spaced them out and got a lot of easy shots. They looked pretty unguardable on offense in that game. So there are enough indicators kind of mixed in that 9-6 stretch, despite the weak schedule, despite the struggles against good teams, for me to, especially given the return of Bradley Beal in the long run and how good the team has been with KD and Devin Booker, to not write this team off. And so, again, you're not going to get overreactions out of me from regular season basketball. I still have them as a top 5 contender at this point in the season. Number 4, the Los Angeles Lakers. Still have them at 4. They had a disappointing loss to Dallas the other night on the tail end of a back-to-back. Also, their third game in 4 nights played a significant role, in my opinion. They're also missing their 2 best point-of-attack defenders for that game. If you're going to play Dallas, you really want your point-of-attack defenders, and Jared Vanderbilt and Cam Reddish, who have been the 2 best point-of-attack defenders for the Lakers to start the season, missed the game. So obviously, tough hand of cards, but they still had a chance late and ended up losing on that Kyrie Irving game winner. But they are playing some solid basketball of late. The Lakers have won 6 of their last 8 games. Some similarities to what I was talking about in terms of good and bad basketball, like Rui Hachimura coming back really helped. Anthony Davis missed some time. He came back. They're playing some easier opponents in this stretch. Voila, the wins start coming, right? So again, like that's kind of the natural pathway of the regular season that we need to get used to. They are 3rd in defensive rating and 6th in net rating over their last 8 games. I have a couple of quality wins in there as well against Phoenix and against Houston. They are up to 9-7 for the season. They're up to 9th in defensive rating for the season, which I think is encouraging. When you consider how poor the point-of-attack defense has been with Jared Vanderbilt being out, for them to be at 9th in defensive rating is super, super encouraging. They are slowly but surely making progress in a bunch of key areas, but they still have a long way to go. They've played a pretty tough schedule, but they haven't fared well against the bad teams. 11 of their 16 games have been against teams that are 500 or better, but they're just 4-7 in those games. And it's been a pretty consistent theme, like what you saw in that Dallas game. With exception of the Houston game, which was the one time where, like, from start to finish, they looked competitive in a game against a good team. Outside of that, it's been the same thing. They come out and get shellacked for 3 quarters, and they look up and they're down like 15 to 20 points. And then they either lose by 20, like they did against Orlando or against Sacramento, or they have this hellacious effort in the late 3rd, 4th quarter to come back and make it a really close game. And they've won a lot of those games. Like most of their wins have looked like that. But, like that Dallas game, sometimes it goes the other way. Sometimes they fight all the way back and they lose like they did to Dallas. Sometimes they fight all the way back and they lose like they did to the Kings earlier in the season. And so that's been kind of their MO at this point, is whenever they play a good team, they come out lackadaisical, they come out low energy, they don't play with a lot of force, they find themselves down big, and then they just lock in and play this crazy, frightening defense, and all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, LeBron James and Anthony Davis with their perimeter players playing hard is actually kind of a pain in the ass to deal with, and they start to have some success. But I think it's a bad trend for this Lakers team that they're not taking the beginnings of games particularly seriously. This has been, again, we're not talking like 2 or 3 times. Like, we've had almost 10 games this year where the Lakers have played bizarre basketball for 2 or 3 quarters, and then suddenly they lock in the second half, and next thing you know, you're playing a tight game in crunch time. And so that's been kind of the identity of the team here early. They're giving up a lot of wide open threes. A big part of that is their point of attack defense. They're losing shooters off ball. We saw a big example of that at the end of the Dallas game when Austin Reeves, who to his credit owned it after the game, but it dug down on Luka when Taurean Prince had him kind of sort of contained and gave up a wide open catch and shoot 3 to Kyrie Irving. That's been an issue. But Jared Vanderbilt coming back should help. Cam Reddish has been pretty solid as a point of attack defender. Hopefully his groin injury doesn't keep him out too long. The rebounding is improving. They're 72% in defensive rebounding percentage over their last 8 games, which ranks 12th in the NBA. And again, the one thing that makes me super optimistic about this team compared to last year is LeBron James just looks incredible. And it's not about the statistics, because I know the statistics are not, incredibly standout statistics compared to what we've seen in recent years, but I think this version of LeBron James is better than any version of LeBron we saw in each of the last 2 seasons in terms of overall winning impact. His command of the game is just at a much, much higher level than it was in the last couple of years. I think that that's incredibly encouraging for this team's potential playoff ceiling. And the stats have been pretty impressive. Last 13 games, 27 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists for LeBron in 13 games on 58% from the field and 44% from the three-point line. That's incredible. He's been especially great in clutch situations. He made a bad read at the end of that Mavs game. That lob to AD, had he thrown it a little bit higher, he might have had a chance. But a higher percentage play, in my opinion, is that right shoulder fade that I keep begging him to take. He had Kyrie Irving. It's a size mismatch. He had space. Take that little right shoulder fade. That's a shot that you can make. You've been shooting jump shots really well this season. So, again, that was not his best decision, but for the most part this season, he's been incredible in the clutch. He was incredible in the clutch before that play. So, I don't think it's much worth overreacting to. And I think in general, second-guessing LeBron's crunch time decision-making is just stupid. He still has the most clutch field goals made in the league with 15. He's shooting 65% from the field in clutch situations, which is outrageous. His jump shot in general this season is awesome. He's been one of the best jump shooters in the league to start this year. LeBron James' jump shot has been worth 1.18 points per shot. Out of 59 players in the NBA to attempt at least 100 jump shots, that ranks 5th. So LeBron's jump shot and how good he's been in crunch time and just how good he's been in general is a huge encouraging note, because a lot of this other stuff is fixable. Jared Vanderbilt will come back. This team is positioned to be able to make a trade to upgrade their point of attack defense. Anthony Davis is playing like shit on the offensive end of the floor since his injury. So a lot of other stuff is going to rectify itself. The Anthony Davis thing is clearly still being bothered by his hip injury. Before the injury, he scored 26 points or more in 5 consecutive games. Since the injury, he failed to score at least 26 points in 6 of the 9 games. So clearly is dealing with that. Kind of looked like he was coming out of it there. He had 27 against Houston and then 26 against Utah. But then 3rd game in 4 nights, dealing with an injury, you're going to have a bad night in there. 10 points against Dallas, right? One thing with him, just 10 for 37 on jump shots this year. That's 0.62 points per jump shot. Out of the 217 players in the NBA to log at least 35 jump shots, he ranks 215th. Only Asar Thompson and Theo Maledon are behind him. So that obviously is concerning, because he's getting a lot of these, he got a couple of them late against Dallas. He's easy pocket passes for these 12-foot jump shots, and he just can't make them. And he has to make that shot. It's just so important for your roll man to be a threat there in the middle of the floor in order for anything to work in pick and roll. And he just hasn't been doing his part there. So hopefully he'll get it together. But I think the Lakers will continue to improve over the course of the coming month. Number 3, the Milwaukee Bucks. This is my one big switch on this list besides moving to the Timberwolves on board. I have the Bucks at 3rd and the Celtics at 2nd. And I'll explain why in a minute. A big picture for Milwaukee, 10-5, 5th in offense, 22nd in defense, 8th in defensive rebounding, 4-4 against teams that are 500 or better. Nothing that's insanely concerning there. Obviously, the defense has to get better, but we have a feeling they will, right? Really not a bad place to be considering the newness of the roster construction, right? Dame has started to play a little better, but he still hasn't quite figured out where he fits in offensively with his team. Still isn't hitting his pull-up jump shot at the rate that he did last year. I still think they need to upgrade the 2 spot. Malik Beasley's been shooting the shit out of the basketball, shooting way better than he did in a Laker jersey. But at the same time, I think defensively and from an athleticism standpoint, you need something a little bit more in that position, and he's better coming off the bench. Giannis has been better from the perimeter. That's exciting. He's 4 for 12 on catch and shoot threes this year. That's a point per shot. So that's exciting. In general, he's been better outside of the restricted area. He shot 19 hooks this year. That's already more than half as many as he took all year last year. He took 37 all year last year. Now, he's only 8 for 19, which is just 42%. But if he can just get that up to 50% and keep leaning on that shot a little more frequently, I think that's going to be a huge weapon for him in the playoffs. Bobby Portis has been playing really well over this recent stretch. He's given him I think about 14 and 8 a game coming off the bench. But I'm dropping them behind Boston, and here's why. They simply have way more that needs to go right in order for them to get out of the Eastern Conference, in my opinion, right? Dame has to consistently get back to where he was last year, and he just hasn't been. Even in this 5-1 stretch, 25 points per game on 40% from the field and 36% from three. That's good, but that's not Dame, right? Chris Middleton, his knee has to hold up long enough for him to get into a groove. They're limiting his minutes a lot, but the high firepower that we saw from Chris Middleton in the playoffs just isn't there. He hasn't had a single 20-point game yet this season. They need to anchor their perimeter defense with an upgrade at the 2 spot, so that has to be a hit at some point. And they straight up cannot afford an injury to any of their core players. Like if Dame or Chris or Giannis or Brook go down, they're so weak in those position groups that they're basically screwed. That's just not the case with Boston. Like, first of all, for the Dame thing, Jason Tatum's been so good this season that I'm not even sure there's as much of a gap as we're used to seeing in a playoff series in overall superstar play between Jason Tatum and whoever the other guy is. That gap has been shrinking every year, and it very well might be non-existent at this point, right? So like that's part of it. They don't need to make a trade to anchor any sort of position group. They can afford an injury basically to anybody but Jason Tatum. Like if they lose one of the guards, they're still a championship contender. If they lose Porzingis, they're still a championship contender. If they lose Horford, they're still a championship contender. If they lose Brown, they're still a championship contender. They have so much more margin for error. They're a little thin on the front line, but you still would need to see both of those guys to get hurt for them to be in any real trouble, right? So like they're just in a better spot. And beyond all of that, they're just flat out playing better basketball right now than Milwaukee. And so to me, like, and look, we're going to reevaluate this over the course of the season, and we'll see how we feel when we get to the playoffs. But at this point, doesn't Boston just feel like a safer bet? Even if we all agree that if all those things go well, if Chris Middleton gets back to 2021 form, if Damian Lillard gets back to last year's form, if they anchor that 2-guard spot, if they stay healthy throughout the season, like, and they were going into a series against Boston, like, do I think they could beat Boston? Absolutely. Might even pick them. But the odds of all that stuff going right, it just is a longer shot than Boston's version of that story, right? And so for me, I just think like, well, again, we'll make a call when we get closer. But for right now, I've seen enough to within my contender tier, move Boston past Milwaukee for the time being. Boston, 12-3, despite playing the 5th toughest schedule in the league so far. They're 6th in offense, 2nd in defense. They got revenge on the Sixers last week. They beat up the Bucks the other night. I watched that game this morning. They look very clearly like the best team in the Eastern Conference. They beat Milwaukee in the way that I expected them to beat Milwaukee, right? Like Drew Holiday and Derek White just hounding Damian Lillard all over the floor, forcing him into extremely difficult shots. Like, again, Dame can make difficult shots, but what makes him Dame is he can also generate a lot of really easy ones and hit those at a high rate. And Boston's got the point of attack defense to really, really, really make Dame work, right? And that goes a long way. You saw on the other end of the floor their ability to just space out Milwaukee and, punish. Porzingis had a big game in this particular game every single time Giannis or Brook Lopez or Bobby Portis would help off of Kristaps Porzingis. He's open at the 3-point line. And it's not just shooting. He's making shots there. Made a big one in the 4th quarter, but it's also driving those closeouts and getting into the lane and knocking down shots. Like that Porzingis piece just goes a long way towards their ability to really space the Bucks out. Tatum was matchup hunting the smaller Milwaukee guards and having success. And I even thought Tatum held up pretty well guarding Giannis on a couple of specific possessions. He's just a lot bigger and stronger than he used to be, and he can actually hold up physically up against Giannis in a better way than he used to be able to, right? Now, still some of the same stuff, right? Like in that late first quarter run where Milwaukee kind of made it a game, you see it's like Derek White and Drew Holiday take like 3 transition threes in 6 possessions, and you're like, why? Like, why? That's the curse with the Celtics team is they're so damn good that they sometimes settle for shots that are not great shots. Doris Burke, I thought in the broadcast, did a really nice job explaining the difference between a good shot and a great shot, right? I'll give you an example. Like, I play pickup basketball in Tucson, Arizona. There's a good amount of talent here, but it's not like as talented as when I lived in Phoenix or in Charlotte, right? And so like I'm bigger and more athletic than most of the players I go against, right? And so like I can dribble up the floor and shoot a pull-up three every time I want. And I could probably hit it at a decent percentage because I can get good separation. But like, does that mean that's what I should do every time? Probably not. I should probably use that as a fallback, right? Like I should probably hunt easier shots along the way and then use that as kind of a counter, right? And the Celtics have a tendency to fall victim to their own talent in a lot of different ways. Where like, they're so much better down the roster than other teams that like, you've got guys that are dribbling up the floor and it's like, man, he's kind of backpedaling on me. And I have a decent look here, and I practiced this shot. I can hit this. And it'll be Derek White rising up into a pull-up three. And it's like Boston's at their best when they drive and kick for fantastic shots, for wide open catch and shoot threes and for layups. And again, like the tough shot making piece, that's a ceiling raiser, but it should never be your foundation. And so there's a little bit of that stuff there, but overall, just their margin for error is so massive as a virtue of their big talent advantage that they have and their overall depth and ability to build functional basketball lineups even when core players are out of the lineup. Like they're just really freaking good, for lack of a better term. And I think at this point, they're very clearly the best team in the Eastern Conference. Again, Jason Tatum playing like a bona fide superstar goes such a long way towards alleviating some of the other concerns surrounding that team and all of the takes that we had this summer about half-court shot creation and whether or not Dame could push the team over the top against Boston. It's like none of that really matters if Jason Tatum becomes that guy. And I'm still seeing a ton from him that is super encouraging on that front. And last but not least, the Denver Nuggets. 10-5, 9th in offense, 10th in defense still, so still defending at a high level. Just 4-4 since the Jamal Murray injury. Reggie Jackson's done an okay job filling in for him, 14 points per game, 48% from the field, 37% from three. Jokic has been missing his three-point shot. That's a big one. He's taken high volume. He's taken over 5 of them a game over this span. That's been a big way that he's been trying to bolster the scoring without Jamal Murray in the lineup. But you got to remember, he was hitting them close to 50% in the playoffs, and he's been hitting about a fourth of them in this span. And that's gone a long way towards kind of limiting their offensive potential without Jamal Murray in there. But what does this recent stretch tell us? Nothing, really. Doesn't really tell us anything. They can't win without Jamal Murray, like a championship. Of course not. There's not a team in this league that can lose their second best player and win the championship except for maybe the Boston Celtics. And it's because they've got 6 guys that are really, really, really good, right? So, like, I don't really think that says much. And in the big picture, their core 5 players still look every bit as good, if not better, than they did last year. Christian Brown has been awesome and has provided a lot of that, like, athletic force that Bruce Brown did last year. Their bench sucks, but it did last year, too. Like, they're getting outscored by 14 points per 100 possessions without Nikola Jokic on the floor this year. They got outscored by 12 points per 100 possessions without Jokic last year, so it's not really that much of a difference, right? And like, again, this has been a long road trip. On the road in Houston without Jamal Murray, that's a tough game to win, and they lost it. On the road in New Orleans without Jamal Murray, that's a tough game to win, and they lost it. On the road in Cleveland without Jamal Murray, that's a tough game to win, and they lost it. On the road in Orlando without Jamal Murray, that's a tough game to win, and they lost it. Tonight, they're on the road in Houston again without Jamal Murray. That's a tough game. They might lose it. That doesn't, again, take a deep breath, zoom out, core players missing, tough stretch of the schedule, probably going to drop some games. And that's what they're doing. And even then, they've been 500 over this span. So I haven't seen anything to persuade me that Denver is no longer the top tier, I should even say just championship favorite that they were to start the season. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I appreciate you guys for supporting the show. We're going to take the rest of the weekend off, and we'll be back Monday with power rankings, and then we're going to do instant reactions and deep dives of teams as we go throughout the week. As always, I appreciate you guys, and we'll see you then.